Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you enjoyed your breakout sessions and you're brimming with ideas. So we're now going to have the very first of our two deep dive sessions. Phil Went, our Global Transformation Director, and Leon Doherty, our Head of Client Onboarding, who have years and years of delivery excellence experience, will be talking to you about overcoming AI adoption challenges. Please welcome Phil and Leon to the stage.
Thank you, Natalie. I'm glad you didn't say how many years. So welcome to our session on, where's the clicker? That might help. We've entitled From Eager to Effective. This is purely focused on software development. So hopefully it will play to the software practitioners in the room, but also hopefully you'll take some lessons and some insight that will be useful if you're not in software development, because I think it's quite relevant to AI adoption generally. But before we get into the detail, Leon, why don't you introduce yourself?
Thanks, Phil. Leon Doherty. Wow, almost 40 years in our industry, computer science degree a long time ago. 10 years hands-on software dev subsequently, and then 5 years I worked on client side facing NashTech. I was the lead person for 2 organizations facing NashTech. Had a really excellent experience, and then decided 13 years ago to begin working for NashTech. So my day job is an engagement manager, working with some of the people in this room alongside those clients. And then I'm also involved in pre-sales and onboarding. Thanks, Phil.
Thank you, Leon. And I'm Phil Went. I've been with NashTech for 15 years and over 40 years in software development. Until recently, I was the global software delivery manager, but I've just changed to a new role, focusing on transformation, primarily based on AI across our business. So in this session, we're going to talk about some of the insight from the Custom Software Development Survey, which I think is relevant, particularly to developing software, as opposed to the more generic discussion this morning. We're going to give you a little bit of a history about our journey of AI adoption over the last couple of years. And then we're also going to talk about what might be coming next, which hopefully will be of interest. And I guess on our journey, like many, we were eager and I guess excited by what the technology was going to offer, but equally with a lot of resistance and hesitation in terms of what that's going to mean for our people, how we deliver software, and ultimately for the wider sector, which I think many people are probably wrangling with in terms of what that's going to mean. But let's look at some of the survey results that's relevant to what people are saying around software delivery. Firstly, 96% of people are saying AI is impacting their strategy, making the strategy go faster, having to accommodate and integrate AI into their roadmap. 85% see AI as an immediate priority for integrating into the software development lifecycle, and 75% think there's going to be a significant impact on how you develop software. I think our perception would be is, well, what's the other 25% thinking? Because we think it's going to have a dramatic impact on how software is delivered. But also about half or just under half are trying to strike a balance between the adoption, the speed of adoption, and how effective they are in terms of governance and controls around the adoption. So ultimately, organizations are eager to adopt. But what might be the obstacles to adoption? Well, when you look at resourcing, 43% are saying there's insufficient skills internally, and 35% saying they can't access those skills within the market. 42% is still concerned about trying to protect their data, protect their IP, having suitable governance before they apply AI. And this is all underpinned by a general challenge across the industry in terms of a shortage of suitable skills in order to support what people are trying to do in their business. So it leaves you in this pilot trap where people are eager to adopt but struggling to apply. So that pilot trap is a common, if you like, occurrence when you're trying to apply to new technology. And this is a representation of the adoption curve of different cycles of change And if you look in this model, during 2025, really people were trying to apply Gen AI tools to varying levels of degree, mostly constrained by the capability of the tools, but also with a wide variation across different sectors in terms of how much adoption they were able to apply. But now when you look at this, we are already in the next cycle where agentic is coming along at the same time where people are only just getting their heads around generative AI. So trying to cope with that rate of change is extremely challenging. You've just got on top of the technology that's available, then the next wave is hitting you. So imagine it upon, as if you're surfing in the sea, you just get your breath, and then another wave hits you and you're trying to adapt and cope and think about how do I adapt? How do I apply that technology on top of what I've only just learned and I'm trying to refine and improve?
So, Phil, where do you see NashTech in this chart?
Well, I guess we'd like to see ourselves as leading adopters. I guess we're past the Gen AI era. We're very much in the agentic era where we're already piloting and trialing agentic AI with our clients. But Leon, why don't you take us through our journey to date?
Thank you. Thank you. So I'm going to talk to you now over the next few slides about that journey. So this is the experience that NashTech has had as practitioners with the clients, of which some of them are in this room. We started in 2023. We started with R&D, large language models, and then began seeing that the tools were actually surprisingly effective at that early stage, and decided that we would work towards real pilots. So we did some pilots internally on small projects, and then at the end of that year, transitioning into 2024, we felt that the maturity was there to allow us to start to use those with clients. So that was through the rest of 2024, was adoption and then rollout, and more detail in the next slides on that point. 2025 was a bit of a reset, almost the same thing once more. Agentic AI this time, tools were better, and we went through the same process again. So the rest of the journey, let's see. Gen AI, so this is the 2024 period. The most important thing we found during this period was value from the tool, but actually it was really ensuring protection of those two key things, the IP and data. We realized very early doors, if those things were not secured and sacrosanct, then we shouldn't be using the tools, and neither would be advocating for our clients. So we went out and we did a proper evaluation and made sure that those tools that we selected and began to use met those basic needs. So not using the data for training by the vendor, and therefore not having the risk of any code or prompts from our people and our use popping up for a rival company. So we worked with our clients, identified 5 clients who wanted to be part of that pilot, early stages of 2024, followed a scientific approach whereby we identified clients where we'd gotten some really strong metrics as a before case, trained our people, adopted the tools, skipped a sprint while we were getting ready, learning, and then began measuring an after, so before and after, and then ran that over a 3-month period, looked at results, and you can see at the bottom of the slide there the results we saw. Yeah, some variation, but basically 10%. That's what we were finding as productivity gains in that period. But not least, and so important also, we saw improved quality, and our people enjoyed using the tools. And you'll see some quotes about that a little bit later. People actually enjoyed and wanted to continue to use the tools. I've listed the tools along the bottom. What we found at this stage was that the tools were localized to particular parts of the software development lifecycle. So, for example, GitHub Copilot was particularly good at coding, whereas the other tools, UserDoc, for example, was a tool that was very good for business analysis. So they were siloed. I guess that's the key word to say at that point. We found that the biggest impact was around greenfield. Brownfield, not such a big benefit, but the greenfield quite significant.
Leon, what about the different layers of the stack? Was it as effective across the whole stack?
And the answer is no, it wasn't. We found that it was particularly good, the combination of greenfield back end was the sweet spot. We found we were getting the best results, and significantly more than 10% in that combination. But when it was greenfield front end, less. It was quite marked. We suspect it's to do with the maturity of the tools at that point in time and their ability to really consume things like Figma. Thanks, Phil. Okay, so now this is into 2025. So agentic AI tools. And that word, let me define it a little bit. So in terms of these slides, my definition is that it's where those tools that we'd used previously from the Gen AI era had two key aspects added to their functionality: Model Context Protocol, MCP, and agent mode. And those things were very important in making these tools far more effective than the previous iteration. We followed the same process. Again, scientific method. We evaluated the tools, made sure that the protection around those tools was correct, and then went out to our client base, this time with a pilot for 7 clients. Ran the process just as before, scientific method. The results this time, 30%. So really quite a significant move on the 10% from the previous iteration. Again, improved quality, improved staff motivation. People wanted to use the tool. And so we were very impressed. What did we learn? So significant improvement in productivity. And the thing that was also noticeable was that the tools were effective across the job family. So picking on GitHub that I mentioned previously as an example, that one we were able to use from the business analysis, development, and testing, and gain benefit from all of those stages. And Cursor, another one, but basically it's a set of tools, and they were able to hone in on fewer tools and get the benefit across. And so we were very pleased with that.
Leon, put it in basic terms, what difference did it make for individuals within the team? You know, you talk about MCP and agents.
Yeah.
Practically, what difference did it mean to the individuals?
Yeah. So the first phase, the Gen AI phase, we found that the tool was making suggestions and help and made some improvements in that area as an assistant, I guess. Whereas we found with the agentic, it was the step beyond that. It was actually truly making changes and offering real value to the developer or the BA or the tester. So it was the next level. Thanks, Phil. Okay, this is about our rollout journey. So it's just another illustration of the story I've been telling here, which is, if you start with the blue line, client engagements started in early 2024. So with a very low number, 1%. And over the course then of the next 2 years, right through to the end of last year, 2025, we've gotten to the point where the blue line is now at 40%. So what that means is that 40%, at that point, 40% of our clients are using some AI tool or other with our teams and gaining benefit from doing so. And then the red is maximum productivity gains. We're showing on the left-hand side 10%. So that was that initial phase. This is using the Gen AI tools. And if you jump to the right-hand side, 30%. So it's kind of been a slow growth as we've learned and improved, gotten better, and achieved 30%.
What do you think's inhibiting the client adoption rates?
Yeah, I mean, we'd love 40% to be 100%. Why is that? And we suspect strongly, and that we ask this question regularly, and the answer that comes back to us pretty much always is that those clients are not yet comfortable with the tools, that they're still concerned, and we point to the terms of these various tools where they say they will not use for training, for example. That's the most common concern. But despite that, there are many clients who are still not willing to take that bet, take that risk. Thanks, Rob. This slide then is about key decisions. So a summary of what we felt was significant and made a difference. So foundation first. We found that the AI tools magnified good, which is clearly to be avoided, and magnified or bad, which is the one to be avoided. So what we found was that if something isn't right, it's not right, then aim to fix that before you throw AI at it. That was the key message on that one. Governance and security, absolutely underpinning, must do that. Without that, then all these other things are not on firm foundations. Capability gaps, the importance of investing in people. We had some feedback in the early stages before our developers began using the tools, and back in 2024, and before they got trained, they had real concerns about what was going to happen to their jobs with the impact of the tool. And once they got through the training and understood it, they were very comfortable, and you'll see some statistics in a short while about what that was. People like using the tools. AI's proper role, there's a slide next, which is trying to illustrate our view is so important, that the human is in control and is accountable. Measuring benefits, be honest about the return on investment. Again, I've presented here a scientific approach to measurement. We haven't made numbers up willy-nilly, and we think that's to be followed. That's the way to be. This slide then, on the left-hand side, what this is trying to show is the interaction, the interplay between a human and the AI. And over time, we recognize that precise details of that will change, but the point is it's a kind of a loop. So, the human is giving information, giving prompts. The AI is producing some output that's relevant to that person's job role, and then the human is iterating. So, that's absolutely optimal. The key thing that's indicating in this slide is the right-hand side, which is the final output from that process, whether it's code, whether it's test scripts, or whatever it may be. The human who's been using that tool is accountable. And what must never happen, in our opinion, is that a person, let's say it's a developer, checks some code in, does a pull request, and then somebody else does a code review, which is our standard practice, and then says, why does the code do whatever? And the person says, oh yeah, I didn't realize. That's what the AI did. Absolutely verboten, absolutely not acceptable. And that's one of the key messages we pass to our people. They must own the code or the test or whatever it did. Some challenges then. So left-hand side talks to challenge, what we did and the impact of that. So starting from the top, moving too fast. We felt we avoided that challenge. We recognized it, and we took a very careful, deliberate approach to the adoption. And we think that that's paid dividends, and we're now in a sustainable stage. IP data, security fears, I've touched on a few times during this talk. Again, it's so important that you select the right tools, you've got the right license, you've got the right governance framework, you've trained the people, they realize what they must and in particular must not do in terms of putting certain things into the tools. And as a result of that, we've had no security incidents. Skills gap. Aim for 100% training of all the people who are going to come in contact with these tools. We've achieved 90%, and we're on track toward 100% training by the end of March. Developer fear, I touched on it a little bit earlier on, and it's, again, my view is it's overcome by training and exposure, and then the fear goes away. People realize it's there and can help make their job more interesting. 85% feedback from our community offshore that they really enjoy using the tools and want to continue to use those tools. ROI uncertainty. Again, we're advocates of systematic measurement, and we feel that's what we've done. And then as a result, it's a clear ROI of these tools. There was an initial concern about too many tools. You saw in that 2024 slide there were more tools listed than in the 2025. So the direction of travel is better, as these tools are able to do more roles within the job family, which is to be applauded. And we've standardized on some of the top tools, and I'm pleased to say that some of the tools that we were advocating in 2024 are still the best tools in our opinion in 2025. So focused investment. Okay, employee feedback. So this is from the survey that was talked about. I'm going to quote some of these people in terms of the results that they provided. So we've done a survey. Everybody who's used these tools, you could read some of these ones. Productivity, AI tools help make me more productive, which is, I guess, to be expected and a nice quote. Quality, feel more confident in code quality, which is great to see. Complexity allows more time to focus on complex problems. And repetitive reduces the amount of time spent on repetitive tasks. I think those two in particular, I think, are great. And I think that leads people to, again, ultimately want to use the tool because they're enjoying using the tool and it makes their job more interesting. So in terms of specific quotes then, I feel like I can write tests 3 times faster with an AI agent. Wow, that's pretty impressive. I was worried at first, but now I can't work without it. Not so sure about that one. That's slightly concerning, I think. AI doesn't replace me. It helps me do the work I really want to do. Okay, I like that one. That's a good quote I like. AI sometimes generates plausible-looking but incorrect code. Always review suggestions, which is back to the human-in-the-loop point that I was making a little bit earlier on. Okay, so this is my last slide. So results overview, AI adoption. So what have we found after our 2 years? So 40% adoption across our clients at the end of last year, and it's now a higher number than that. 30% productivity boost we've seen so far with the Agentic era set of tools. 90% of our workforce have been trained, and we're on the track for this 100% I mentioned. I'll expand a little bit about quality. I've touched on it a few times. Quality's improved. So we're a big advocate of a tool named SonarQube for measuring code, and in particular code smells. So there are bad smells which are to be avoided. And what we find is that if we compare a team that's before, whether before the AI and after, we never had many occasions of bad code smells, but we did see occasionally some. So it's not really kind of statistically significant, and that's why we've not put a number here. But what we can see is that when afterwards, there was a note reduction in that number, which is why we feel the quality has improved. So good thing. Staff enjoy using the tools. So I'm going to hand back now to Phil.
Thank you, Liam. So in parallel with looking forward, I guess, beyond how we've applied the technology, we've also been considering what the impact is going to be on our ways of working. We're probably at the cusp of that in terms of the speed that the tools are allowing us to go. And this is a diagram which I think illustrates, it's actually by a guy called Rob Zuber from CI Circle. But it's trying to illustrate the fact that, okay, you want the human in the loop. You want the human to be validating each step of the process to make sure that the outputs are effective and appropriate. But the trouble is, as the automation speeds up, and what used to take days, maybe weeks, is being done in hours and minutes, the amount of outputs that are being generated then create a queue or an overload and a bottleneck in terms of the human trying to process and validate the outputs that the tool is generating. So I guess the question is, why validate in the loop? Maybe the answer is to let the whole cycle run, put the requirements in, get the code tested out. Well, you'll probably say, well, there's a risk to that because you're incurring potential rework. You might have picked something up earlier in the cycle that would actually mean you've got to go back and rework a lot of the other steps. But to be honest, you look at the speed of how quickly the loop is going, it doesn't matter so much. You're not so worried about driving that efficiency. You accept the fact that I can go back to begin and just run the whole press again in order to get the output I would prefer.
Hey, Phil. So how will agile teams operate in this new model, do you think?
Well, I think when you look at some of the constructs of Scrum, a lot of those, or some of them, are really designed to optimize efficiency within a team, whether that's sprint planning, retrospectives, regression testing. You have these constructs in order to try and make the team more efficient and effective. But in this world, again, why do you need to do that? I think the feeling is we're going to end up with more of a Kanban-based approach, where you develop features in isolation because you can do it so quickly and the inefficiencies you're trying to eradicate become less relevant. So what's coming next? We talked about the wave upon wave and trying to cope with the change. And the reality is orchestration is already upon us. MCP and agents allows you to join activities and tasks up into sequences, and you can create higher levels of automation. But if you look at the model, on the left, there's an interesting feature called shared memory. That's not only allowing tasks and activities to refine and improve how it's operating, it's also allowing the whole model to refine and improve and learn and adapt. And I think our viewers in this world, instead of validating or adjusting or manipulating outputs, you avoid that. You actually use the model to refine and improve to get the right output you want. Why? Because you want the model to improve. You don't want to be interfering in what it's doing in terms of the outputs. So by adjusting and refining the inputs and refining the model learns and becomes more effective in terms of how you want to operate. So I just want to do a recap, some key takeaways. I'll start at the beginning in terms of some insight from the survey. I guess what I'd say, people are eager to adopt, but everybody's struggling with the same challenges. So you're not alone when you're thinking, how do I overcome these challenges? Our key messages to you in terms of our experience and our learning is we've iterated several times now, human in the loop is absolutely vital. You know, the person needs to take responsibility. Do not assume AI is producing the right output. You know, it's going to get smarter and more accurate, but you need to validate what it's producing. You can't just trust it as a basis of truth. Our experiences try to apply AI across every stage of the delivery cycle. People focus on testing and development. That's been the key activities in the cycle, if you like. But what we're seeing is if you apply it into elicitation, applying it into mock-ups, the more you can automate and drive efficiency across the whole cycle, all the way through to deployment, that's where you're going to get the significant gains and benefits. We invested a lot of time in training and governance. As Leon mentioned, you know, we're almost at 100% now. That's important because you want everybody in your team to know how to apply the AI tools. You know, don't think you can just direct it. You need them to actually understand the principles and the foundations of how to use the tools and how to apply them rather than being prescriptive. I would also say AI is in a continuous improvement process. Don't think it's a one-time deployment. You know, it's very much like Agile in that respect. You constantly look to refine and improve, work out where your quality is going, how you can drive efficiency, look at your metrics in order to feed that in the process. That's even more critical in AI, using agents. You know, you need to be understanding, how do I make this a continuous exercise within the team in order to get the most value and the most benefit? And lastly, people focus on the productivity gains, but quite often they overlook the quality gains. You know, lots of our clients are reinvesting the productivity gains they're achieving by doing higher levels of unit testing, more regression testing, more security testing. And let's face it, in the world we're in at the moment, with cyber attacks, you know, and trying to protect environments, spending more time and investing in ensuring what you're producing is highly secure is a wise investment, in our opinion. And lastly, I touched on a few things in terms of what's coming next. Multi-agent models will deliver, again, further significant gains from where we've got to so far. And I would encourage you all to look at the ways of working and think about not just about how you apply the technology, but how you adapt and you change how you work with the technology. So lastly, I'd just like to share a little experience I had, if my text will go up. Good. So I went to an event at the House of Lords. It was AI in the health sector just before Christmas, and there were some politicians, some civil servants, senior civil servants, and a lot of people from the health sector, and a splattering of people from the IT sector like myself. And during the session, I guess there was two things I noted. Firstly, it made me realize that software development is really at the forefront of AI adoption. You know, I don't know whether, you know, whoever started to use it think, I need a solution to solve, therefore I'm going to start writing software with it. But when I looked at the health sector, it was very clear we are a long way advanced. And that actually came up on the screen this morning in terms of where software development is in terms of AI adoption. And I guess the second thing that was quite relevant, and this is a common theme that we hear, people worried about, you know, the fear. What's it going to do for my jobs? I guess in the context of health service, I found it a little bit surprising because AI realistically is not going to take away, you know, essential patient care, which is a key part of the role. But, you know, nonetheless, it was a key fear within the room. And at that point, probably when it was at its peak, one of the senior consultants stood up and started to talk about cardiology and the impact AI is having on cardiology. And I'll read this specifically because I wrote them down at the time, the three things. He said, firstly, it's enhancing diagnostic accuracy way beyond what was possible in the past. It's allowing early detection of diseases, again, way beyond what was possible in the past. And it's also helping them create much more tailored and better outcomes for patients based on the diseases they are detecting. AI is not reducing it's not it's not reducing the need for cardiologists, but it's fundamentally changing how they go about doing their job. So we're not seeing less cardiologists. What it is allowing them to do is to spend more time with their patients in order to give the essential part of patient care, which is interacting and understanding and explaining to patients the treatments that's required. So I found it sort of quite insightful, you know, and you think, well, what relevance does that have to SDLC, you know, where we haven't got people's lives? But I guess my takeaway was actually, and this has come through a few times today, look beyond the uncertainty. You know, you're fearful, but actually look beyond that and look at the opportunity in terms of what you could do differently and what you might create with AI helping you. So that's the end of our session. I'll pass you back to Natalie. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Phil and Leon. As Phil said, this is all about sharing our experience and our learnings, really. It's not about theory and opinion. It's about genuinely sharing experience and learnings today, as Phil said. So that's fantastic.